just to kind of get into the science behind some of flotation and just kind of, so floating was invented in the 1950s.
Seriously?
Yeah, so it doesn't have thousands of years of traditional Chinese medicine or, Hindu culture or something like that attached to it. Like it is very much a very new frontier of the mind and the body and kind of that area where it all comes together.
Yeah.
And so it was invented by a neuroscientist in the 1950s named John C. Lilly. And he also is famous for the study of dolphins, delphinology.
Okay.
So John Lilly and a couple other people were sort of at an attempt to isolate consciousness. They were trying to figure out, like, where is this all coming from, this sort of sentientness? Mm-hmm. And very analytically so, they're like, well, what if we just cut off the brain from all the external world? Will it respond, or is it a knee-jerk reaction to information, or no? And they found that, because all they had really known is that sensory deprivation was torture.
Right.
But if you tie someone, if you put someone in sensory deprivation against their will, yeah, that's torture. Also, water's not torture all the time, but if you put someone in water against their will, that's torture. No Anything's torture if it's against somebody's will.
Right.
So they really thought that people were going to go insane when they got in the float tanks, and they found the complete opposite. They were like, this is actually incredibly relaxing. So they started to study things like why, the mammalian dive response, just how when we go into the water, how our bodies calm down and how our heart rate slows, like when we touch the water and we relax into it. What's really cool, they found, is that when we're in the float tanks and we're not being bombarded by this constant external world and we transition into that theta state. You may have heard about it on the Joe Rogan podcast. Michael Pollan wrote the new book, How to Change Your Mind, which goes into it a little bit. But it's basically about the default mode network.
Okay.
And you think about it like you see something that's red, you think stop, or hot. You see something that's green, you think green, life, go. Those types of things. And I'm very, very simple, like in the sense of everything you do in your life is a repetition of patterns and conditioning that basically get you through life. Because if you didn't, you probably get hit by a car or something like that. You have to have these constant cues that are in place that kind of dictate how we move through life. It's almost like a nozzle on a hose that limits the amount of flow. Right, because if we're taking in the billions of signals that we're taking in all the time, like if we were listening to that motorcycle outside,
we'd be freaking out.
We wouldn't know what to do. So it's almost like we have like a nozzle that limits the amount of flow of stimulus that we're allowed to take in.
Okay.
The thing is, though, is that what happens sometimes is in this stimulus flow nozzle processing system that we go through, this default mode network, we find people get the wrong signals. Right. So if you look at post-traumatic stress disorder, where someone hears a loud noise and they have a fight or flight response, or people with addiction, where they can almost see themselves doing the thing, but they can't stop themselves from doing the thing. Yeah. And it's just like this pattern that they can't get out of. It's like they're going down a hill and they're just like, I'm seeing myself doing it, but I can't do it. Yeah. So this default mode network, it's this system that just constant pattern and processing over and over again. And when you get in the float tank, when you do meditation, when you get into that flow state of running or exercising, or they found through now with the research into psychedelic therapy that what it does is it deactivates the default mode network. So it's basically deactivating this system, and Michael Pollan uses
is it like
phrase, he says,
neurogenesis?
Not neurogenesis per se, but so this is what he says. He says, imagine your brain is a mountain covered in snow.
Okay.
And every thought going down the hill, or every sled going down the hill is a thought.
Okay.
And over the course of your life, those thoughts going down those hills develop deep, deep grooves in the snow.
Okay.
And you can't stop those thoughts from going down those hills because it's like it's just stuck in the rut.
Right.
So when you deactivate the default mode network, it's like shaking the snow globe or getting a fresh snowfall so those sleds can then move along the path of least resistance. So you ask me, do people open up after the float? Very much so.
Okay.
Because they did a 4-year study at the Laureate Institute for Brain Research in Tulsa, Oklahoma, on flotation therapy for combat veterans with severe PTSD. And they found that the float was actually more effective for them than their medications.
Wow.
So people really open up. When you move from the head, which is just this constant, like stress, into the heart space, which happens a lot in the float, people are very, very relaxed and very open after the float. Some people are closed, but we also, too, we don't poke and prod people very much. We have a really relaxing lounge for people to hang out in.
Yeah.
Kind of similar to this area here, a little bit more colorful with some cool stuff to like look at, books to read and whatnot. We don't ask people to describe their experiences to us directly after their float. Sometimes they want to sort of just stay in that. You know, it's like if you wake up in the morning, someone's like, "Hey, good morning. How are you?"
Oh,
You're like,
you're just like, I'm not ready for that.
I'm just chilling, taking my wake and slow, to quote Ro. Also,
cool.
too, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, "Hey, how are you?" You know, I like,
you're a morning person.
I'm a morning person.
Nice.
My girlfriend's like, "Stop, just please."
Hush.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a lot of benefits to the float. It really does help people open up a lot, and it's also one of those things where people are able to open up to themselves. You know, because a lot of people that come in and they don't want to be talked to by a therapist.
Yeah.
Because flotation's great for hypertension, anxiety, addiction, post-traumatic stress disorder, chronic pain. So when you're insomnia. So when you're dealing with people who have stress, anxiety, hypertension, chronic pain, which leads to stress and anxiety and stuff like that, people getting a little slice of relaxation, they want to just maximize the mileage on that. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you don't want to like pop their bubble of where they're at. So really, we'll just give them a cup of water, let them, kind of let them know that they're welcome to sit and enjoy the space. Let them know that there's hot tea if they want any, and then we'll give them a little while, and then we'll say, "Hey, did you enjoy your float?" or something like that. Cool. And people do really open up. People have some profound experiences in the tank.
Nice.
More profound than my own experiences, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was do you recall your first experience?
My first float experience? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It wasn't really too profound. I was, I think, so excited and ready and knew what it was going to be like. And I was like, some people, they hear about the float and they're like, "Oh no, I don't want to do that." Yeah. And I, watched the movie Altered States, which is like this 1980 cult classic starring William Hurt that's loosely based off of John Lilly's life, where, this scientist, makes this float tank and this isolation tank, and he ends up having a self-actualizing, de-evolving hallucination. So he like de-evolves into a primate in his hallucination.
Oh, he goes like feral?
In the tank, yeah. And then he like becomes a primate in the tank, and then he escapes the tank, and then escapes the laboratory and breaks into the zoo and like eats a bunch of animals and stuff like that. It's a really crazy movie.
What is it called?
It's called Altered States.
Altered States.
Yeah, and
I'll watch that.
We actually show it every year at Weightless on Halloween. It's like our Halloween spooky movie.
Like an industry night, sort of?
Yeah, well, we actually, for industry, not for float industry, but for service industry, we do a 15% service industry discount for anyone who works in the restaurant industry, because both Chelsea and I are just, hardcore restaurateurs and have been for a long time. And we don't, as of right now, you never know when you end up being back in a restaurant. Right. But as of right now, we don't work in restaurants, but we understand people on their feet all day, fucking running around, bartending, getting yelled at, making $2 an hour. So we do a 15% service industry discount for float and massage, float and sauna, excuse me.
The most intense job of my life was working at El Camino.
Yeah.
That was so, I just ran food, but going back there, I had never seen a more cutthroat situation in my life, and like after that, I had never worked at another place like that. No. And it was, I don't know, it was just a deal, but that was where I met you and everything, of course, but
that's right when I first moved here.
Dude, I don't know what you think of that, but that was so intense for me, and I was just like trying to do college classes and everything, and like trying to get food on tables, but I heard just the nastiest like insults hurled in the kitchen, and it was just intense for me, and I was like, this must just be like the.
Have you worked in many restaurants though?
So I worked at the Post afterwards, which is just
you worked at Chelsea there.
Pizza. Yeah. I worked at Chelsea there, and just beer and pizza. But then I worked at the River House in Levy, over on the river. Yeah. But I bar backed, so I wasn't in the kitchen that often. Yeah. So, the places that I worked at, like those three places, trying to think if I was at any other restaurant, because
Restaurants are just rowdy though. Like it's its own animal. It's its own beast, you know.
I mean, it just gets like that sometimes. I get it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Anthony Bourdain has a really beautiful quote just about how crazy a kitchen is.
Yeah.
But you know, Anthony, he also wrote a book called Kitchen Confidential, just all about like just kind of the whole kitchen and just the restaurant, the beast of the restaurant, you know, and just kind of what it is and what it goes into making it all happen.
Yeah.
Anthony Bourdain's he was a really big proponent of the float tank.
Really?
Huge proponent. He actually has a great quote, and he's like, oh yeah, you know, we'd get done after a long night of work, you know, we'd be like high all night on who knows what from the rush of people coming in and all this stuff going on, and then we'd get out and you get so jacked up when you're working in a restaurant until 11, 12 o'clock at night, like just like go, 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 go. And then you're like, what do we do? And they would go and they get in float tanks and they're just relax because it just like it just resets you. I call it the power down, power up. You know, like you spend